Of course, I can say the Michaels or the Reggies or those, but the one I really hated to guard was Larry Bird. He was not a nice guy.
Larry Bird talked more trash on the basketball court than anybody I've ever played against. And he told me two things one game.
This is the story. I haven't seen it, but this is the story. Larry got the ball against John Koncak, and he's like, looked to the coach, he's like, you went with him on this matchup? And I guess Larry Bird just dropped the ball and said, man, I don't even want this shit.
Larry Bird had a way of making defenders instantly regret stepping up to guard him, and he didn't need a lot of words to do it. But when he did speak, his trash talk hit hard. Bird didn't talk for show. He did it to gain a psychological edge, to break opponents down mentally and to tell them exactly what was about to happen, then go out and do it. It wasn't flash or bravado. It was cold-blooded execution, play after play. He didn't need social media to go viral. His legend spread the old-school way through locker room whispers, highlight reels, and the first-hand accounts of players who had to live through it. Larry wasn't the most athletic guy on the court, and he didn't have a flashy image. But if you had the job of guarding him, he'd make sure you left the game humbled. He'd tell you where he was going to shoot from, then bury it in your face. He'd taunt coaches to send someone better. Sometimes he'd start talking before the ball was even in play, running his mouth as he walked onto the court. Now we're looking back at some of Larry Bird's most savage moments, not through dirty plays or cheap shots, but through pure skill confidence and nonstop trash talk. Take Eddie Johnson, for example, not some bench warmer, but a skilled, confident scorer. Even he wasn't ready for what Bird brought. Johnson recalls one unforgettable moment. The game hadn't even tipped off yet when Larry Bird strolled up, looked him dead in the eye, and hit him with something he'd never forget.
He walks out, and he just stares next to me, and he leans over and he looks at me. Do you honestly think you gonna guard me? You all think this rookie gonna guard me? Man, I'm gonna bust you up. He walks around, standing in front of me, so I'm gonna tell you something right now. I'm gonna wear your ass out. Game starts, and he just wearing me out. He came down, he said, you talking all that junk. I bet you can't do this.
That wasn't just a one-liner from Larry Bird, it was a mission statement. And he followed through on every word. From the opening possession, he went to work on Eddie Johnson with zero hesitation, no second thoughts, just pure confidence and buckets. What made it even more brutal was how effortlessly Bird made it look. There was nothing flashy or over-the-top about it. It was cold, calculated, and clinical-like. He'd already seen the game play out in his mind. Johnson did his best to keep up. But by the final buzzer, there was no doubt who owned the night. Then there was Mark Price, an on-court technician. Quiet, composed, and deadly from deep. He wasn't the type to talk much, but when it came to scoring, his game did all the speaking. Before the accolades, before the all-star selections, Price was just a young guard trying to prove he belonged. That chance came during his first ever appearance in the NBA's three-point contest. Surrounded by some of the league's deadliest shooters, he sat silently in the locker room, mentally preparing. The contest was just minutes away, but one presence hadn't arrived yet.
Plan. My favorite three-point story of all time was my first time I ever competed. And of course, I don't know how they do it now, but they bring you in a locker room. You're all sitting there, kind of talking with one another, waiting for them to call you to go out. And Larry Bird was in the contest my first year, and everybody was in the room, but Larry wasn't there. The guys were kind of saying, anybody see Larry? Whatever. And all of a sudden, right before we're supposed to go out, the door opens and Larry sticks his head in. And he says, oh, hey, guys, this must be the room for second place.
That was Larry Bird, no warm-up, no build-up, just one cold, simple line. Then he went out and made good on every word, winning the entire three-point contest, like the outcome had already been written. For Mark Price, it was a lesson. That moment wasn't about showmanship, it was about presence. Bird didn't need to hype himself up. He just walked in, stated the truth, and made everyone else deal with it. Craig Alo was a different kind of player. He took pride in his defense. He wasn't the fastest or flashiest, but he brought grit every single night. He'd dive for loose. Balls fight through screens, take charge. She was the kind of guy coaches trusted to make the tough plays. And when it came time to guard Larry Bird, he didn't shy away. There was one night in Cleveland where Bird had a rough first half, shots weren't falling, and it seemed like Elo and the Cavs were finally getting the upper hand, as both teams headed. To the locker rooms through the same tunnel, Craig saw an opening and decided to say something. What came next would be one of those moments that sticks with a player forever, a reminder of who they were really up against.
Larry Bird, he was not a nice guy. Matter of fact, there was one game in Cleveland where he was having a pretty rough first half, and in the old days in Cleveland, you walked off the court the same way at halftime, and I kind of puffed up on him and walked beside him and was like, yeah, you're 1 for 10. I was like, that's defense, and he just kind of looked at me and said, there's 2 halves. And he came back out and hit about 10 in a row on me, and the last one was left-handed, and he asked me if my mother was watching because he wanted to embarrass me. So, yeah, so he was tough.
That was Larry Bird. He heard everything, remembered everything, and when he stepped back on the floor, he made sure you remembered too. After hearing a little trash talk at halftime, he came out in the second half and dropped 10 straight buckets, capping it off with a smooth left-handed jumper just because he could. He didn't need to scream or show off. One look, a few choice words, and then he lit you up for the rest of the night. For players like Craig Elo, that wasn't just a highlight, it was a warning. Don't poke the bear. Especially when the bear wears number 33 and has a jumper that doesn't miss twice. Then there was Rod Strickland. He didn't have a long, storied rivalry with Bird. Their careers only briefly overlapped. By the time Strickland was carving out his place in the league, Bird's body was already breaking down. But even so, Larry managed to leave a lasting impression. No build-up, no trash talk, no dramatic moment, just a single play in a regular season game. And yet it stuck with Strickland for the rest of his life. That's the kind of impact Larry Bird had. He didn't need time or context to leave a mark. Just one moment was enough.
I wasn't around long because he was hurt when I was playing that first year or second year. But I just remember one quick thing. We were playing against him, and I think I stole the ball. And I just remember him turning around saying, you little piece of And I was like, to me, that was Larry Bird. And I was so happy because I'm like, that Larry Bird told me you're a little piece of
That was the thing about Larry Bird. He didn't need a roaring crowd, perfect health, or even a lead on the scoreboard to catch fire. All he needed was a reason. And sometimes that reason was as small as a rookie daring to swipe the ball. That's what made every moment with him unforgettable. Even his trash talk had weight. It wasn't just about getting in your head. It was about acknowledging you in his own ruthless, legendary way. For a young player like Rod Strickland, being cursed out mid-possession by Larry Bird wasn't an insult. It was a badge of honor. When one of the greatest to ever play the game singles you out, you don't walk away offended. You walk away with a story you'll tell for the next 30 years. Kevin McHale spent his entire career right beside Bird, watching him up close in practices, on the road, in the locker room, and under the lights. If anyone understood how Bird's mind operated, it was McHale. And even he couldn't believe some of the things Larry pulled off. Before one game, the Celtics were just going through their normal pre-game routine, nothing unusual. Then, without warning, Larry stood up. And in that instant, the switch flipped.
Larry stands up and Larry says, a couple of the few choice words, and he says, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to take it out on their rear ends. So I was like, oh, all right, so let's go. So we go on the floor. Albert King sitting there. Larry walks up to Albert King and goes, don't take this butt whooping personally. I've been eating hot dogs all day. And then Albert King looks at him like, you've been eating hot dogs all day. What's that got to do with me? And we went out and just hammered him. I mean, we terrorized them. And that was Larry. There was no excuses, and he just played. And I tell you, that was just his competitive nature.
But that was classic Larry Bird. He didn't need a pregame ritual, a pump-up speech, or some fiery warm-up routine. Sometimes it was just a few words, and maybe even a few hot dogs before stepping on the court and dominating. What made it even more brutal was how upfront he was about it. Bird didn't hide his intentions. He'd look you dead in the eye, tell you exactly what he was about to do, and then go out and do it exactly as promised. Albert King never stood a chance. By the time the game tipped off, Bird had already mapped out how it would end. Because for Larry, being great wasn't enough. He wanted to show you that he could outplay you on a stomach full of junk food and still make you look foolish. That made the beatdown even more disrespectful. Then there was John Sally. He came into the league with swagger full of confidence, intensity, and never afraid to talk back. He'd battled elite scorers and bruising big men. But Larry Bird was something else entirely. Bird didn't need to yell or posture. He'd calmly break you down, drain a shot in your face, and still hit you with the most disrespectful line of the night.
You know how you play defense, you lean, and then they don't do this anymore, but they punt and they do a fadeaway? Mm-hmm. Right? Everyone did it, right? Guys would bang you and then fade away on one leg, try to be like, Wilt Chamberlain. Larry would hit you and go like this, and then you would fly by.
Shot fake.
And he'd be like, stupid. Stupid. I'm just constantly snapping, saying things like, yeah, oh my God, I'm gonna give you 50 tonight. He was like, oh my God, they're not gonna throw you the ball. They're not gonna throw you the ball.
That was Larry Bird at his coldest, calling you out mid-play, mocking your defense, and then casually pointing out that your own team doesn't even trust you enough to pass you the ball. He didn't need to shout or flex. He just had to outthink you, and he almost always did. And when he did, he let you know with one look, one word, or one perfectly delivered insult. His fadeaway? It wasn't flashy, and it wasn't fast, but it was lethal. You'd lean into it trying to contest, and before you could even react, the ball was already gliding through the net. Meanwhile, Bird was jogging back down court, shaking his head like it was just another Tuesday. For John Sally, it was a reality. Check, because when Larry Bird called you stupid, it wasn't personal. It was just the truth. Then came Shawn Kemp, explosive, confident, and ready to shake up the league. He entered the NBA like a thunderclap, dunking on anyone in his way with raw athleticism and unshakable swagger. Most rookies might get ignored or brushed aside by vets, but not Kemp. Larry Bird had already taken notes. And from the opening tip, he made one thing clear. This wasn't going to be a warm welcome.